Okay, so today we're going to go over how to remove, clean, and repair a caliper from a 1997 MXZ snowmobile. What we've got here is the caliper once you get it out of the engine bay. It's simply attached by two bolts here and here to the crankcase. And so this is what you're looking at once you get it out of the vehicle. The only other thing that you have to do is remove the hydraulic input screw here in the hydraulic line. You want to make sure that you have something to catch the hydraulic fluid when you do that. Hydraulic fluid is pretty corrosive stuff and will corrode plastics and paints and things like that. So you want to make sure that you don't get any of that anywhere that you don't want it. So once you take it out, you simply unthread these two fittings here, take these two major bolts out, and this is what you're left with, two halves of the caliper. I've already taken the bleeder screw out on the other side, but this is what we're going to deal with today. So we'll put that guy over here. On this side, the main side of the caliper, we can see that the piston has actually been frozen open. When that happens, the caliper itself rides against the brake rotor, and what can happen is a lot of heat can build up. When I caught mine, the caliper, the rotor was actually red hot, and I have heard of people lighting their sleds on fire and things like fuel lines melting, so it's better to catch this sooner or later. So what you need to do, and what's happened here, is there's got some things in here that's gunked this up so that it won't retract down to its open position. So when you squeeze the handle on the brake, what happens is the piston actuates out, pushes the brake pad against the rotor, and then when you release it, it won't return to its home location. So even when you're not squeezing the brake handle itself, the brake is partially on. So what we're going to do is we've collected a few things here today. We've got some WD-40. We've got two metric bolts. These are metric 10 by 1 pitch bolts. I've got some vacuum fittings. This one specifically is made for 1/4 inch down to 5/32 inch tubing. And we've got a length of 4 millimeter or 5/32 inch tubing. And we're basically going to use this as a pressure line into our caliper. The last thing that you'll need is some kind of valve. This is a Presta valve off a bike tire that was blown. I know I'll use this because it connects directly to my bike pump, which I have hanging around. So it's pretty easy connection. So what you can do is simply get that going. There's step one. Step two, so you really want to make sure that the stuff is empty of any of the brake fluids that may be hanging around. I washed this out pretty good. You take your bleeder valve off. And what I've done here is I've taken the other bleeder valve and I've already connected it to this length of tubing. I put some Teflon tape around the threads. You want to make sure that you don't cover up the porthole in the fitting itself, because that's what we're going to be using to push some air through this. So your first step, once you've got this threaded up and your porthole is not covered, is to tighten this guy down. Now you don't want to seat this fully like you would in an installation of the brake. You just need this really finger tight, maybe a little bit past finger tight. If you do seat it all the way, it'll actually cover up the porthole and you won't be able to put any pressure in there. So now you've got your brake caliper, bleeder valve, length of tube, and you've got your pump with your valve. Like I said, this is a Presta. More common valves, use Schrader valves. Either will work fine, you just may need to get a different fitting. So there's actually enough rubber in the stem that I can simply insert this like so. I'm going to do the same thing to the tube end. You don't have to get it over all the barbs, just one or two will probably be enough. Alright, so that's pretty good, pretty tight, we're good to go. And before we do anything, we do want to make sure that there's actually air flowing through this tube down behind this piston. Alright, so what we're going to do, basically just block up one of these holes with my thumb. Remove the pump, just make sure I hear some air coming out of this hole here. Which I think you can. I think you can hear that. If you can't, you can see the bag moving from the air coming out. So we know we've got air flowing to the back of this, which is good. So the next step is to take our two bolts and simply plug up these two remaining ports. Once again, all you really need to do is get it finger tight. You don't have to crank these down. In fact, I wouldn't recommend doing that because you don't want to damage anything. Okay, so this is our setup. So what we've got is our air in through the bleeder valve, which is half seated by design. Block port, input, piston. So really this is all closed up right now. This is a closed system. So what we're going to do is we're going to function this pump. But before we do that, we're going to put it inside the toolbox. The reason for that is when you apply pressure to the back of this, it's slow to react, and what's going to happen is a good amount of pressure is going to be applied by the pump. And when this thing finally comes loose and slips past the valve seat, it's actually going to come flying out pretty good. I know the first time I did this, I read on the gauge it was up to about 80 psi. The diameter on this thing is about an inch and 3/8 maybe. So you're up around the 100 pounds of force area when this thing actually comes loose. So you want to make sure that it doesn't come off and hit anything, anybody. So I'm just going to put it inside my toolbox here and do one of the latches. So the last step, simply apply some pressure to the pump. You don't have to do this incredibly quick. Actually, it's better if you do it slowly because the piston does need some time to move. So I'm just going to push down. I think you heard it come off. I know I did. Open this up. And here we go. Caliper, piston. Okay, so what we're looking at, this is your piston itself. As you can see, all it is it's just a fine finish surface. And you can actually maybe see down the bottom here, there is a little bit of rubbing. That's probably where it was getting locked up. So it looks like you may have to just clean that off. On the inside here, there's actually two seals, 1 and 2. Looks like one's a ring seal and one's some kind of modified O-ring seal. So when you clean this out, you just want to make sure you don't use anything that isn't safe with, anything isn't safe with DOT or DU 3 or 4 brake fluid. You want to make sure you don't corrode those seals. And that is it. And I'll be doing the same thing with the other piston just to clean it out. Make sure it's all put back together correctly. And this is a good thing to know. For about 10 minutes of real work and about 30 minutes of scrounging in some cheap parts, you can fix your own caliper instead of buying a new one off Skidoo for $250. And that's all. It's more money in your pocket. Thanks.